Katie,
Hey,
welcome to the
Thank you.
podcast. We're going to jump right in. Why the marathon?
oh, okay. So
Why the marathon?
my marathon before this last one was in 2014, and it was Boston, and I completely fell apart. And I had done two previous to that, both the Tallahassee marathons, and I guess it would have been 2012 and 2013. I fell apart in those. So in my running life, it had been this white whale that I wanted to finally be able to do, and to do in a way that I was proud of, and could look back on and be like, it didn't defeat me. Because in the 3 times I had tried previously, I was walking, I was just miserable. I started out at, such and such a pace, and my pace dropped by, 2 minutes a mile by the end.
What was it? Yeah. So I want you to describe what is falling apart for you, because you are an elite masters runner. You've ran your whole life.
you,
You
yeah.
ran, I know you ran in high school and college, and then
Yeah,
you took a break.
Yeah.
You said F this and took a break for a little bit, and then you came back to it and really kind of like I feel like rediscovered your athletic potential in some regard, because you came back and now you're running still amazing races and incredible times. And so when you say falling apart,
So
what is falling apart for you?
I think it would be falling apart by anybody's standards.
Okay.
So because I started out, all 3 that I had done before this past one, I had started out at probably say a 7:30 pace.
Yep.
And then I had miles in there that were 10-minute miles, where
Right.
and I had periods where I'm just walking.
Yep.
I don't remember so much the hills of Boston, but I started feeling feeling like garbage by mile 16. That should
Which
not
is before the hills even really
Yes,
begin.
Yes.
Yeah.
That should not be happening in any race where, before it's 2/3 over,
Yep.
you're spent, any distance.
Yes.
That just shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So as you approach, you got your vengeance, your redemption.
Yeah, I got
on the
I
marathon.
feel like I got my redemption. Yes.
As you approach this training, which by the way, your marathon time incredible. Like a 2:50 marathon, just insane in general. But then
you.
also for watching your split paces, it was picture perfect. They were beautiful, steady, beautiful paces the whole time. All of us who were watching you were like, this is could not have been a better race. And you were actually fighting some kind of poor conditions out at Grandma's Marathon. The weather sort of turned, the wind kind of turned, and it got hot, a little rainy, a little windy. And you were training in Florida, you're heat trained, but still, you don't want to have to race in hot weather if you
Right.
if you can help it.
Yeah.
So what was your approach this marathon prep? What were a couple of the big things that you changed in terms of your overall training? And then let's do training, and then we'll get into nutrition, because I
training.
know they're both their own beast.
Yeah, so my training changed a lot.
Okay.
I went into it with a really, really, really solid base. I had consistent, even from January, I had been hitting 60 miles a week, and that was feeling comfortable.
Yep.
And then I said, if I'm going to do this, I need more marathon pace runs. I think, and this was my experience, so many people do their long, slow distance, and I had done that in previous, in my old marathon training cycles, and you know what it trained me and prepared me to do? Run long and slow. So and you know what I mean? So I had to practice running marathon pace. And so pretty much anything that I did that was, over 16 miles, it had some marathon pace stuff in there. I also did I love going to the track. I love seeing friends there.
Yeah.
I love, cooling down and warming up with people.
And being at the track as opposed to being on the road or trail, it just sometimes it's a good switch up, I feel like, in
It
scenery.
is. Yeah.
Even if you're going in circles,
Yeah.
it still is nicer
It's
in
very
some regard.
nice.
Yes.
It's very nice. So I would get to the track a lot of times, and I would do, like Gary Droz does our 3 miles of,
And you'd
intervals.
be coming in bright and early, way earlier than us.
Yeah.
Finishing up your already.
Right. Well, and
Finish
doing
up.
some stuff like before the workout so I could keep that volume in there and everything. But yeah, I mean, so a decent amount of volume, but instead of just like the long, slow distance, like keeping the speed there. They're keeping stuff faster than marathon pace in there. And then a lot of marathon pace stuff. Like,
For your long runs, that's when you would sort of touch marathon pace. For your Tuesdays, that's when you would go a little faster. You'd get some speed work in. So shorter runs.
Yes. Yeah.
That's how you relatively how you structured it.
Mm-hmm.
When you broke down your week, and obviously everybody's going to look different in terms of intensity, volume, that kind of thing. What did your overall week look like? Was it like Tuesdays was more speed, Thursdays was more threshold, Sundays we were doing a long run, or Saturdays we're doing a long run. This day we're doing easy miles. How did you break down overall?
Yeah, good question. So most of my days were easy days. But I had I was hitting 70-mile weeks pretty regularly, almost 75. And that was real common.
Yeah.
And that was
so with volume being so high, you had to really be careful with how you're adding in those quality, that intensity.
Yes.
Yeah.
So intensity and quality was just Tuesday. Tuesday, Saturday. Usually it was Tuesday, Saturday. Yeah. And so I'd keep at least 2 easy days between the higher quality workouts. Yeah. And when my volume was lower, when I first started the training cycle, I could do a Tuesday, Thursday, and then a Sunday kind of more speed. But then as the volume went up and those especially those Saturday workouts I did a lot of runs 20 miles or longer
with marathon pace in there.
With marathon pace in there. And I needed it for for confidence, because I had so many poor training cycles before, but also you get the physical adaptations.
I was going to say, I think it's important also to be touching marathon pace in your runs, not just for the mental boost, but because you need to understand what it feels like when on a long run to be at your pace.
Yes.
Otherwise you're going to get to the day of the marathon and you're just not, you're going to be used to the either speed day or the low and slow long run.
Yeah. And
you have to be able to put a little bow tie on it and be able to kind of combine the two on the actual day of the marathon.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've trained for, 1.5 million marathons and not that many, but and it's I would always do, 13 plus miles of, easy, gently. And then I would do at least half of 6-7 miles at marathon pace, kind of, sprinkled in there with say 3 miles, 2 miles, 1 mile, something like that.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of approached my marathon training in the same way, where I was doing, longer runs, but I would have in there, half of the distance was marathon pace, because that's what kind of, that was what I looked up a training plan. That's what my training plan called for, and that's what made the most sense to me. So
yeah. Rough training plan. Tuesday was speed work. You were accumulating about 8 miles worth of work?
Sometimes it was more.
Okay.
There were days where I didn't go to the track and I did something on the road.
Got it.
So those days I was doing at least 10, but probably more 12 to 14 total miles, but with 7.
Because you had 3 miles of quality efforts.
Work.
With just the track team.
Yes.
And then you'd be there before, usually doing 2 mile repeats of sorts, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So 4 to 6 miles before that. So 9 miles of quality. Yeah. Between 7 and 9 miles of quality on Tuesdays.
Wednesday, what days are you resting? What days are we not really running?
It just depended on the week. I would take off 1 day a week.
Okay.
Probably every other week or every third week. Just because, but I would do I would feel my recovery would be enhanced if I went out to a trail and did 4 to 5 miles really easily.
Chill.
Rather than taking the day off total.
Yeah.
So I would do that because I like it.
Okay. And Tuesday and Saturdays were your actual quality. The rest were, when you're saying easier runs, what does that look like for you? What is a Thursday or a Friday look like for you in your training block?
Most of it was just out the door, in our neighborhood on the cement. Also, the race was on, the pavement, so I wanted to make sure I was training my body in that way. But say 5 to 8 miles.
Okay.
If I had the time and I had, the childcare and everything worked out, I did a couple of 2-a-days, not too many, but I like that. So I would do maybe 8 miles in the morning and then do 4 miles in the afternoon, like early afternoon, something like that.
And for easy pace for you, you're going based off of feel. Just keeping
based
it relative.
off of feel, yes.
Still looking at obviously pace in case you're like, whoa, I'm going way too slow for.
Yeah.
But just overall, like kind of RPE.
Yeah, RPE, and then my pace would be an indicator of like, am I recovering the way I want to recover, like the way I should be recovering, like. Yes. So, but yeah, just RPE. I'd never really, I would have something where maybe I wanted it, but I wouldn't push myself on the easy days to like hit that pace.
When it comes to advice, giving advice to somebody who wants to train for a marathon or has been training for a marathon and they also want that redemption. They are like, I want to have a good race. What are a couple things that you would take from this past training block in terms of just gold star? Like, this is the stuff that I really nailed that I would definitely carry into, because everyone's training plan is going to be different. Yeah. There's also, like, you're a mom, you got 2 kids, like you have things that are going to shift and change depending on people get sick, whatever. But what are some things that are like non-negotiables? I'm definitely including this in my next training block, and I suggest people include these concepts into their next training block.
Yeah, I'd say the runs of, I would say at least 20 miles, but 20 to 22 with like as much marathon pace in there. Like, I don't want to say as much, but with at least 10 miles. I put in 16 miles at the most of marathon pace. But so with that's a lot to, like, I had never done that before.
Yeah.
So
you're looking at like 50 to 70% marathon pace.
Yes.
In your run.
And you can break it up. Like, sometimes I would break it up. I liked the more, 10 miles at marathon pace, just continuous without a break. But I know people would say, if that seems, too much to handle, do 3 miles on, 2 or 3 minutes easy or something like that, and then do it again. And, until you get the total amount of volume that you're comfortable with. And I started it early. Like, I started it where I was, because my marathon pace was 6:30. And that just seemed, when I started the training block, that seemed like, I don't know how I'm going to run that many miles at that pace. That I don't want to run 3 miles at that pace because it just seems uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But, so I started doing a long run and doing 3 miles in there, and then, up to like 8, up to 6, and then just kind of being like, okay, I can do this, to where it wasn't so scary. So when I really was going longer, then I could handle the 20, 22 miles with, 10 to 16 miles at marathon pace in there.
Yeah. And I think that's how the marathon feels so daunting, because it is daunting, it is long, but that's really kind of how every race is structured. I mean, for me, it's like, even stringing together, I'm on the other end, right? I'm training for the mile right now. And so there's an element of, we're doing 400 meter repeats at mile race. And it's like, how am I going to string this together to a mile time? There's this element of like, you're touching that fast end of the, like, I'm in race pace and it feels really hard.
Right. Yes.
So you feel that in any race when you're going into your prep,
yes.
and it does string together. You just kind of have to have faith that, like, hey, keep going with your training block and it will come together reasonably well.
Absolutely, yes. Because you're right. Mile pace feels hard.
Yeah.
Even if you're only doing 200 meters of it or like 400 meters, it feels really hard. And like, I think, almost any race we do, that race pace is challenging, and you think, how am I going to do this? But it comes together on race day if your training's there.
Yeah, if your training's there and if you've put in the work and you taper right.
Right, absolutely.
You're not going in too tired. So when it came to marathon training, nutritionally, right, I want to get into this because I think, like, you are gold star when it came to training nutrition for this marathon. And the marathon, it's like, you can't get away with a good marathon without nutrition.
Absolutely.
So it really exposes, how good or poor you've practiced nutrition.
Yes.
So how did you start implementing that? And also, historically, have you been as good with nutrition? Because in the running space, especially female running space, I think that nutrition is very daunting.
Yes.
For a lot of women. So, history with it, and then how did you approach this block with it?
Yeah, history with it, I've definitely had the Red S before, and, suffered because of it. I've had low iron. Just kind of like, I think thinking this whole like thinner is better, and if I'm thinner, I'll be faster. And then under fueling workouts, and then getting super hungry and putting not helpful things in my body. This training cycle, I was like, and I knew too from past experience, like in the marathon, I was like, I'm going to have to train my gut during the race to take in fuel, because that was something I hadn't really done before either. It was kind of like I had tried maybe 2 gels during a race and then, fell apart.
Yep.
And that was all my stomach could really handle. Like when I first started, was like maybe 2 gels, 200 calories, which would be, 50 grams of carbs, like in a whole marathon, 2 hour, 3 hour block.
Wild.
Like, yes. So not very much at all. So I just said, well, I want to be the fastest that I can possibly be. And that means fueling my body. So, I listened to a bunch of like running nutrition podcasts.
Yeah.
I read a book on, I think it's called like endurance. And I think it's called just like peak nutrition for endurance athlete, masters endurance athletes, something like that. So it's like very specific. So I learned about, okay, I'm an older runner. What do I need that might be different than somebody who is like in their 20s? And how can I time my fuel and my nutrition around my workouts? I took the kids to Tasty Pastry a lot. We got a lot of bagels.
Yeah.
And it was like, especially before a hard effort, like a long hard effort, I would cut out fiber the day before and just make sure I got, my carbs in. And lots of carbs. And I practice like carb loading. Like,
and it's like, did it almost shock you at first? 1, training fed your performance, and 2, did it shock you to how much your body actually does need for training? Like how many carbs you could have added into your day and could strategically structure throughout your day.
Absolutely.
Where you're like, wow, I needed way more than I thought. Like, were those 2 things revelations for you in terms of?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
I have written in my training log, I was like, I'm going to try this whole carb thing for a week and see how it goes. And that week was just, hit the pace, just like amazing.
Yeah.
I felt wonderful. And not only did I hit goal times and they felt easy, but then after the training, and this was like important to me and a priority, like I could still parent. I could still spend time with my kids. I think one of the things in my training cycle that like I'm most proud of was I ran 23 miles. I fueled before, I fueled during, I fueled after.
Yep.
And then we took the kids to the water park. And like my husband until like 4 p.m. ish had no idea that I had done that, because I didn't want it to take away from like that experience with like my family,
That's
and we had a
amazing.
great time. And then I 3-4 o'clock, I was like, whew, this has been a day, but like it was great. Yeah. But I was shocked. I was shocked, especially post run, how much better I felt like when I fueled my body. Yes.
I think it's so valuable the way you're even wording it too is there was no wording of body composition. It was literally just, I'm going to focus now on fueling for performance.
Absolutely.
And I think when you can shift that goal to what is going to make me perform the best, then you start you understand. You're like, oh, logically it makes sense. Train fed. Make sure I'm eating enough carbs. Make sure I'm eating enough fiber. Make sure I'm eating good quality foods. Make sure I'm, sleeping well. Like these things start to kind of come into play. And usually the body composition follows.
Yeah,
like your body's
absolutely,
going to get into the composition that needs to perform its best as well. And you're going to see those benefits come. Because the people who are super underfed going to sessions, one, like we were talking about before, you get so hungry and tired later that usually you end up overfeeding at the wrong times, because later you're like, I could eat everything because I just ran 12 miles and haven't had a lick of calories at all.
Yeah.
And then 2, also, there's a certain degree of like inflammation. Just chronic inflammation throughout your whole body. It's going to make you feel heavier and look heavier and puffier.
Yes.
And then you're not going to hit the times as well. You're not going to increase performance as much, which means your output's going to be less, which means you're going to not see as many positive changes in both your performance and your body composition because you can't hit the stuff you're supposed to hit. And so your overall structure in terms of, okay, this is what how I changed my nutrition around my running. What did it look like? It was waking up early and eating. It was, eating during, eating after. Was it, and in the evenings, because I know we talked about this too, like you want to eat in the evenings, but you also want to sleep well. So you got to stop at a certain time. So like, what did the overall day look like? Let's just say you're prepping for a hard workout. Let's even say a long run, because we're talking about the marathon. So you're prepping for a Saturday, and let's talk about the night before. Let's go from there.
So, well, the whole day before, I had to, because I was having GI issues the next day, I had to cut out most of my vegetables. A decent amount of fruit. That was kind of just trial and error to see what my body could handle. But then just a focus on carbs. So, like, instead of having, like, a bowl of berries, I might have, like, a couple handfuls of crackers, or like I said, like get a bagel with the kids, like, and we all had a good time doing that. So, and then like the night before too, I'd have most of my food. I'm an early riser, so I'd kind of have most of my food like an early dinner and be done by like 5:30.
Okay. And that's normal protein, carbs, some fats, like a dinner. A normal dinner.
Yeah. Lower fat, yes.
Okay.
Lower fat. And like lower fiber the whole day. So like dinner would be probably like chicken and rice. Something like that.
You're not doing like dates and sweet potato and stuff
like
that.
I learned that the hard way. Yeah, no spicy stuff. You think you can get away with a little bit of sriracha, but you can't. I did that way too many times. Like I would, text you and be like, I had ice cream with the kids Friday night. Saturday there was walking involved. Yeah,
there were a couple bathroom breaks involved. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't do that. So it was like a relatively low fat, or fat would be earlier in the day, or also like instead of avocado, it would be olive oil because there's less fiber.
Yeah, right.
So stuff like that.
And then stop a little bit earlier, and then so let's say you do your training session. You're going out at like 6 a.m.
Yeah, and so I was waking. So I knew I wanted to go into the race like super well fueled, and I mean I have a friend, Ann Sentner, that is a amazing athlete and has a background in nutrition, and so I talked to her and what do you do? These rumors that I'm hearing about people eating before the races, are they true? And she's like, I take in like 500 calories. So I was setting an alarm, getting up at 3 a.m. sometimes. This was on my longest efforts when I really wanted to mimic what it was going to be like on race day. And I would eat, oatmeal, rice cakes, honey, a banana, and I would go back to bed. And my husband thought I was crazy, and he would just be like, oh God, Katie's got a long run again.
Yeah.
Because I'd set it kind of all out in the morning so I could do as little effort as possible. Yeah. And then I would go back to sleep for a little bit longer, get up, have my coffee, and electrolytes. I would do like the electrolyte tabs sometimes, like the little capsules. Go back to bed,
and then you'd go wake up. And when are we running? What time?
Yeah, like 6 in the morning. Okay. Yeah, with it being as hot as it is, I would start early.
Where do we get intra run, right? Because we're doing the long run, we're doing the long effort. So obviously you're practicing fueling during. So how did that look for you?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate. Grandma's Marathon gave me bottles on the course. I had 8 bottles on the course, and so I had a bottle at. That's approximately every 5K, but I had a bottle at mile 3, mile 7, 9, et cetera. Kind of not completely evenly spaced out, but so I'd kind of make up my bottles the night before. And there was a lot of trial and error. Some things I figured out where they sat well with friends, like it just didn't sit well in my gut.
Which emphasis, guys, on trial and error. So like y'all listening to this, you're going to have to experiment for yourself, and you're going to have some bad sessions because of it. And I have heard about some of these bad sessions from Katie, but seriously, like you have to be okay with the fact that it's training for a reason. You're also training the nutrition aspect of things. So be okay with like couple bathroom breaks, couple rough runs because things are just not sitting right. But anyways, continue.
Yeah, so I did a high carb mix from Morton, the Morton 320. I would split that into 2 bottles, so
Yep.
I would have 40 grams of carbs in my first bottle, 40 grams of carbs in my second bottle, and my third bottle I would do 25 gram of carb gel with caffeine, and
Yep.
then just do like exactly what I thought I was going to get access to on the course. And then fortunately, because I did have bottles, there was the hydration in there too, which was important. I
did put electrolytes in the bottles.
That's what I was gonna say. There's some electrolytes in the Morton. I don't know if I'm not a non-salty sweater, a low salty sweater, or what. I know I'm a decently heavy
You didn't
sweater.
need as many.
I tried more electrolytes, and that was a fail.
Yeah.
It was like I could feel my stomach trying to pull the water in from the rest of my body. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? To like dilute it. It was crampy and it was sad.
Yep,
And
yeah.
those were like walks home where like Zach and the kids would be leaving for work and he would be like, "Not your best day, huh?"
Yeah.
And I'd just be walking with my head hung low. But yeah, just trial and error. So yeah, when I took a gel, I took some like electrolytes. I took a Noon, which
Yeah.
I know doesn't sit super
Don't
well
love
with other
Noon.
people,
Yeah.
but I
Sat well with
tried
you.
different things and it sat really well with me.
Good.
So yeah.
Those are also lower. So I'm
They're
wondering
lower
if that's
sodium,
they're lower.
yes.
So I'm wondering if
Yeah.
that's what like Element. A lot of people who love Element. Those are people who are salty sweaters. Like I'm a salty sweater, so I love me some Element. Like it helps me a lot.
Yeah.
But people who aren't, right, they're probably like, I'm cramping. I feel like
Yes.
crap. I do not
Yes.
feel good right now.
Yeah.
So, on how does after your run look? So during your feeding, probably what you're doing about anywhere like 40-ish grams of carbs on the hour.
So I would do 40 on the low end. Like I had to start low and then like trade my
Yeah.
gut. And then by the time of the race, like I actually just wrote it down this morning and kind of did an estimate of what I thought I took. I think it was like 65, 70 grams of carbs an hour is
Okay.
what I could get to,
Yep.
like without any GI issues.
Okay. And
then-
for you, it was Morton was like your thing.
Yeah, the Morton
Yep.
320 was like that. There's like different things have different like, chemical compositions and stuff. And yeah, it was just so much trial and error. Like,
Yes, you guys are going to have to practice because, again, whether you're taking in a sucrose mix, maltodextrin, whether you're taking in a glucose, just pure glucose, a fructose mix, a lot of people do not sit well with fructose just as it is. So you have to be able to experiment some with yourself because, yes, that's what she's saying when she's saying different chemical composition. The overall how complex or simple the carbohydrate is and how fast it's going to digest and absorb it's going to be different, depending on the supplement or the actual carbohydrate that you're consuming. So you do have to test and see what works well for you. I will say like good starting point is usually some kind of sucrose mix is going to be the best for people. It seems to sit the best, but everyone is different. So, that's where you have to just like trial and error and let it ride. Because again, I mean, I'm sure you were talking with other athletes and you've dealt with, you see what run the gamut in terms of what they're experimenting with, and you probably heard so many different things. This works for me. This works for me. This much per hour. That much per hour.
Yeah.
It's different for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what she's saying is like very general guideline. That's what worked for her and what she trained for, but everybody's going to be different. What would work for my other client, Steph, in a marathon is going to be totally different than what works for you.
Yeah, yeah.
And what works for maybe a 25-year-old girl running a marathon or a master's dude running a marathon going to be totally different. You've got to just take that into account. I want to get into the day of the marathon real quick before I let you go, because I do want to talk about the race a little bit. And how did you feel going to the race? This was the first time you did strength training, prepping for a marathon.
Yeah.
So I feel like we prepped you. We got you pretty ready.
Yes.
You had a great training block and you had great nutrition.
Yes, thank you.
But also like you were feeling pretty good body wise.
Yeah,
and you were strong.
Yes, I felt amazing. Where I had just different kind of like, twinges of like pain or discomfort like here and there. I felt super strong going into it. Of course, I had like the classic hamstring weakness, and you helped me with that, and my weird feet kind of wanting to go out.
That external rotation situation we had going
on. Yeah, so I felt really...
What made you want to get a trainer? Just like, I want to check all the boxes for this race type of thing?
Yeah, I just felt increasing the volume, along with like these really hard efforts was going to break me down, and I would get an injury and I'd be, halfway through the cycle, like the training block, and I have to take time off. And I didn't want to do that. I felt like I want to do this. I want to do it well, and I'm going to go all in on it. So that was part of my going all in. Yes.
Yeah. And you didn't have any real interruptions in your training block.
And I heard of, I have so many friends and that they have such and such an injury, and they'll maybe take time off. And then guess what? When they run again, flares back up.
Yeah.
Because you're not addressing the underlying problem. I mean, so I also didn't want that. Like,
yeah. You were like, I can't have this happen to me.
No, I didn't.
I need to do well.
I like running. I don't want to sit out for 6 months while I heal. I would rather just prevent that downtime, that injury. Yeah.
Yeah. And whether it's injury prevention or, improving, power or mechanics during your running or whatever it is, I do think, strength training is one of those like kind of underrated tools, kind of like nutrition for the marathon. It's just like one of those underrated tools where it's like, dude, pull it out. Like, let's use it because you can.
And I thought it was fun too. I learned so much, and it's not something that I had really done before. I had never had a strength coach or anything. And I thought it was great. I learned it made such a big difference because sure, I could stand there and try to watch myself, but I don't know what I'm doing. Like that's not what I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good. So once you approached marathon day, right, you're feeling good. You tapered very well. Like you went into the marathon from our text, like feeling really great. So day of the marathon, how'd it go? You were going out, you're pacing. You got delayed like 45 minutes?
Yeah, half an hour. So it was kind of funny. I had shared a room with a girl, and we set our alarms, and I wake up and look at my phone, and the first thing is, hey, we pushed it off the start by 30 minutes because of the storms. We were both awake. I mean, nobody's going to go back to sleep at that point. So yeah, we eat. I eat all my foods. And then my bottles had been dropped off the day before, so that then it's just.
Oh, that's so nice.
It was so nice.
That is really nice.
It was so nice. Yes. It was. Yeah. I feel very fortunate that they let me do that. Yeah.
So you dropped. They had it dropped off. So then it was just kind of a waiting.
Yeah, then it's just a waiting game, digest, get coffee in, stuff like that. And then we took the bus to the start. And then I had thought, because it was going to be hot, especially at the end, I had my, a goal, I guess, would have been to go under 250. Yeah. But just, with the race delay and the hotter weather, I said, well, I would rather be a little over that goal pace, a little bit slower than to ignore the weather, go out at original goal pace, and then blow up. I was like, I'm going to finish this steady and even. And I had to adapt to the weather. I think one positive thing was it took the pressure off. So like I've done these types of races before where, you have these elite athletes. I'm sharing a bus with them, and the ride to the start line is you can hear a pin drop. Yeah. And this was very like jovial and chatty, nice. And fun. Let's learn about each other's lives and things like that. And that's on the way to the race. So
that's amazing.
Because everybody was like, it's not a PR day. So
let's just hang.
Yeah, let's just hang. Yeah.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Which I know part of why you were so excited for Grandma's was you were just like, I'm just so excited to hang out with the women and like be with the competitors and like see these amazing athletes and stuff. So you really got to take advantage of that. When you were going, what is the warm-up protocol? And then go a little bit into your actual race in terms of you hit perfect splits and you just sort of kept it. Like, when did you decide to make the decision to just settle in where you were versus so warm up and then kind of your thought process during the race, I would say.
So warm up is, I don't do much for warm up. Especially for a marathon, I don't.
I love hearing people's warm up protocols because it's so different for everyone.
I did the what is you call it, the world's greatest stretch, right?
World's greatest
Okay,
stretch.
so I did that some. I did I do the walking lunges.
Yes.
And then I jogged like less than half a
I'm
mile.
like so proud right now because I have made her warm up before a run, but it's like the busy mom warm up is what I really should trademark it as because it's like the most bang for your buck couple of movements.
Yes.
That's like gets you everything you need, but also is like into exercise.
Yeah. So, and then I did because I told Abigail, I was like, well, my first miles are my warm up. I'm not gonna warm up, but
And I was like, no.
it helps a lot, like to go into the run not so stiff.
Yes.
So then I just jogged maybe, less than half a mile, just enough to make sure my shoes were like comfortable the way I wanted them, tied the way I wanted them, like stuff like that.
That's awesome. So whenever you were running and you were on schedule for racing, like what was the thought process as you went into?
Yeah, my first miles, it was like, so Gary Droz had told me, go out at like 10 seconds slower than your goal pace.
Yep.
That is like the hardest thing of all time.
You feel slow
on marathon day. I felt like I was running 6:36, 6:40,
which
felt
is
like
unreal.
I was.
You're like, it might as well have been 8-minute miles.
I'm looking at my watch and I'm like, this feels like 8:30. Like not. I mean, this feels like the slowest miles of my life. But you're just filled with all of that adrenaline. You're tapered, all that stuff. So in the first half, I'm making sure I get my nutrition, of course, like as much as I can get down of the bottle without chugging a bunch of air. And then I'm just looking at my watch, being like, don't slow down, and just making sure that I stick to that pace.
Yeah.
So there were no miles faster than probably 6:32 in the first half.
Yeah.
When the first half was done, I was like, okay, good. And then it started to feel a little bit more strenuous. But I knew I wanted to get 2/3 of the way through the race without feeling a strenuous effort. And that's what happened. So, by mile 13, halfway through, I wasn't having to look at my watch to slow down really. I felt, comfortable at that pace. It started to get more, challenging about, 17 and a half miles in, but not to where I felt like I needed to, stop, walk, anything like that. But just where I was like, okay, yes, now we're in, the last third of a marathon.
The dues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
There was a hill at mile 22 that everybody calls the lemon drop. I think we go over a bridge. So I went it, a lot of it's just the mental preparation too, because how do you approach 26.2 miles without being cuckoo birds?
Yes. Yes.
So I was like, okay, well, it's a 22-mile race.
Yeah.
I only have to run 22 miles. I've run 22 miles before in a workout, so I can run this 22-mile race.
Yep.
So that was my thought process. I was like, well, make it to 2/3.
Yep.
Which is the 17 and a half-ish.
Yep.
Okay, I feel good at that. And then make it to 22. And then I was like, get up the hill. And I got up the hill. And then I was like, okay, now the hard part's done. Now we just kind of enjoy it. And by that point, you're in, I'm in the city of Duluth, and for being a small town, man, they packed those streets and everybody cheered their faces off.
That's amazing.
And it was amazing. And there was this random guy that I had paced some people. He was a way faster runner than he started out at. So he comes kind of buzzing by, and he's got his arms in the air and is cheering everybody. And he's like, come with me, come with me.
Yeah.
So, I hung with him for a little bit and stuff.
Awesome.
And that was fun.
That's amazing.
But
what a good energy.
It was wonderful. But by, 17 and a half miles, I knew that I wasn't going to fall apart. I didn't know how my last miles were going to go, but I knew I wasn't going to fall apart. And I felt so good, and that sense of accomplishment already
That was
hit.
the redemption.
Yes,
it was like you got it before you even finished. So you picked up. Did you pick up at all? You picked up a little bit, yeah. Because
Yeah.
I'm thinking about your splits. You did pick up a little bit toward the end. So
Yeah,
you were,
I picked up toward the end, which was amazing. And like completely unbelievable. Like it wasn't a ton. Like if you look at the 5K splits, it's even on my watch. It looked like my last 4 miles were my fastest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I started out at that 6:36.
Yep.
Pace-ish, which Gary told me 6:40. Like it was so hard to go even that easy.
Yeah.
And then by the end, it was like I had a 6:10 mile in there. I think that was the downhill
Yep.
one. But yeah, by then it was like, yeah, just I guess ignore the watch mostly because I wasn't struggling
Once
with
you got to
maintaining that
17?
Yeah.
it was
'Cause-
just like, let's just go.
yeah, pretty much.
Because
yeah.
at that point, you're not going to fall apart.
No,
really.
I knew in my bones and in, because of my fueling and how everything was going, I wasn't going to fall apart.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which some people do say, like, it's that last 10K that you have to worry about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But based on how you trained, I think, you knew. It was just like, you get to mile 17 and it's like, is this going to be it for me or is it not? I feel like also it's a little bit different depending on the race. Like something like Boston, you do want to kind of wait until, was Heartbreak Hills not 19?
Yeah. It's
19.
like,
So
yeah.
that is, you do want to kind of be wary of where you're like, okay, 19, we're starting some more efforts, like
Yeah.
new efforts here.
Yeah.
So it's different. But for you on Grandma's, it was relatively flat.
Yeah. It's like there's enough undulation to make it easier on your body.
Yep.
In that it's not just like the St. Mark's Trail.
Oh my God. Yeah.
like,
Where you're just like, please give me some kind of like a speed bump or something.
Let me move a different muscle.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah.
No, this was like a nice that there were a couple of little rollers, but nothing where you ever felt like this is a hard effort. And except for that random bridge at mile 22. And that was, I don't know how, that was not very big.
Yeah.
It did not last very long.
It was just mile 22.
Definitely. Pretty soon, baby. Pretty soon.
Well, that's actually kind of like all
Okay.
I really wanted to chat about with you in terms of, nutrition and fueling and everything. What's your next race though? Do we have anything in mind?
Yeah, no, that's funny. It's like, we go out after the marathon. I'm going out with these girls that like just ran it and stuff, and they're already talking about their next marathon. I am not planning to do
Yeah.
a next marathon.
Yeah.
I am going to, so I'll do breakfast on the track. We'll see how that goes because obviously I've been focusing on longer stuff.
It's gonna be disgusting, you guys. She's gonna beat she's gonna beat everybody.
It'll be fun. It's like
She's gonna beat everyone.
you gotta keep it fresh.
I'm
Like,
just gonna try and hang on to you. Is what I'm gonna do, and I'll be like, if I'm even close to where Katie is, I'm good. I'm winning.
Well, if my husband beats me at breakfast on the track, I always get real sad because then the whole family makes fun of me and calls me the slowest one in the family, and I don't like that. So I'll do breakfast on the track, and then it'll be like I can go back home to like the Detroit area in the fall and do the Detroit International half. And that's
Awesome.
that was a really fun experience last year, so I want to do that again. And then I would love to do the half, like the Indy Monumental half in November, but we'll see kind of, life and work and kids and everything else. So
How that works.
I will see what happens.
Well, I'm excited for you.
Thank you so much.
You're awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So
Abigail.
big thing, you guys, is do your strength training, eat the carbs, have joy in the suffering
Yeah,
of the
absolutely.
marathon.
Yes.
And really just treat your training like it's fun because it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, bye everybody.